A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Neil with you on this Wednesday edition of 2020. We like to check in with Mandy Worby on a Wednesday. And breaking news as it's coming out of Israel, sometimes more broadly across the Middle East, but there's a lot of things going on always. And Mandy seems to have just the most amazing ability to be across detail. Mandy, a special welcome back.
Hello, it's nice to be with you.
Okay, let's start with Israel, the impending incursion into Gaza. Being approved by the Israeli cabinet, and of course the whole world is wondering why. What's the latest on this?
I have to ask a question. Why are you wondering why? Why is this a question?
Some people might be saying, why not?
Precisely. Okay, but there are conflicting views on this. Okay, this is a controversial move. Let me just be clear. Israel doesn't want to do this. She doesn't want to do this. She's had enough. But she has to, okay? So there are those who oppose Bibi and his government. They're claiming that he's the obstacle to a deal to release the hostages. That is categorically not true. Hamas is the obstacle, and they have always been the obstacle. But Israel cannot tolerate living next to a terrorist enclave anymore. Hamas has not changed its charter. They continue to promise war with Israel until Israel is exterminated. They have not deviated. And that's the situation, and it's intolerable. If Hamas is not going to release the hostages or stop the war, Israel is going to fight to prevent another October 7 massacre, which Hamas has repeatedly said they're going to do it again and again and again and again. That means they're going to embark on a large-scale offensive into the Strip. That's what's being planned. Now, the IDF Chief Brigadier General Effie Defrin, he said, the objective of the operation is the return of our hostages, the dismantling and decisive defeat of the Hamas regime. These are two goals that are intertwined. And the Prime Minister is in complete agreement with those goals, right?
And those goals don't seem to be like they've changed ever since the beginning. I mean, that's still the goal.
It's been so consistent since October 8. It's not changed. Now, there are government opposition parties, and what do opposition parties do? They oppose. Why do they oppose? Well, because they oppose. Now, they're saying that this offensive is going to put the hostages in danger, and I'm kind of going, what the? Because the hostages are in danger whether Israel moves in an offensive measure or whether they cease fire. The hostages are always in danger. That is not changing. Israel cannot be idle, enabling Hamas to rebuild and resupply to attack again, which is always what they do, while they're holding on to the hostages and starving them and torturing them and locking them in cages. Israel wants this war over, and that's not going to happen until Hamas is destroyed. It's just the reality.
And while we might be thinking that the war is between Hamas and Israel, there are rockets that are raining down, and there are missiles that are aimed at Israel from many sides, including the Yemeni Houthi rebels. Yeah. What's the latest there? Because there's been some missiles fired at Israel just recently.
Yes, that's right. Now, in the past 18 months, the Houthis have claimed, and I just looked this up this morning, they have claimed to have launched 1,147 intercontinental ballistic missiles at Israel since they inserted themselves into a war that wasn't theirs, that they have nothing to do with. Okay, they have no connection to this war at all, other than the fact that they are an Iranian proxy who are simply fighting on behalf of Hamas. They don't even have a border with Israel. I mean, how many missiles would Australia tolerate being rained down on them? Now, fortunately, only one missile has made it through without interception. They've had debris fall from the sky after interception into Israeli territory, but they've only had one actually hit a target, which is phenomenal, I might add, and it was at Ben Gurion Airport. Now, it wasn't a direct hit on the airport. It was on airport territory on land. It was actually on the roads leading in and out of the airport, and I saw the photos, and I'm going, I've been on those roads so many times, I recognise them. But there were 6 people injured, but no deaths. Thank God, flights were cancelled. They have started to resume since yesterday. But I threw some numbers together just before coming in here. In the last 18 months, there has been approximately over 20,000 rockets from Hamas, over 20,000 rockets from Hezbollah in the north, about 500-ish from Iran directly, a handful from Syria, a handful from Iraq, the odd attack has come across the border from Gaza, and according to Houthis, 1,147 from Yemen. That's close to 50,000 rockets, missiles or suicide drones from all sides coming into little tiny Israel, and Israel isn't supposedly the big baddie on the block and she's not allowed to defend herself. How many would Australia tolerate, or America, or Germany, or Pakistan? Who would tolerate that?
It seems like there's an ongoing miracle that we're actually observing in the way that Israel is being preserved from all of these attacks.
It's unreal.
Come back to those Houthi rebels in Yemen for a few moments, because they haven't been firing missiles only at Israel. They've been firing them at those US warships too.
Yeah, they have.
What's the latest on that?
Well, they started, as we know, they started firing on all international shipping long time ago, and the world did nothing. They kind of went, what are we going to do? Well, when they started hitting American shipping, America has hit back. They hit back big time. And it was just this morning I read a report, and this was from in a news conference, whatever it was, between President Trump and the new Prime Minister from Canada. President Trump said, quote, "The Houthis have announced that they don't want to fight anymore. They just don't want to fight. And we will honour that. We will stop the bombings. They have capitulated and they say they will not be blowing up ships anymore." Well, that sounds great. Israel was blindsided by that statement. But you have to understand the Houthis have missile capabilities, manufacturing facilities underground. So there are a lot of people who are concerned that the cessation of bombing, which is what they're asking for, and we're all relieved about, let me just say, but it's going to give them just preparation time to resume manufacturing so that they can then go on and attack again, which is the MO of all terrorist organisations. This is what they do, okay? The radical terrorist, Islamic terrorist groups, this is what they do. It's called a hudna. I'm going to pretend to a cessation in hostilities till I'm strong enough to attack again. This doesn't mean that if they fire missiles at Israel, that Israel is going to not respond accordingly. Because it was just this morning I got a report from Amir Safadi who said that the Houthis are estimated to have at least several dozen missiles still left in their capacity, but they also are able to produce between 2 and 8 missiles per week in their underground facilities. Some of the facilities have been destroyed, but not all. So this threat still remains. Also, if you know the Arabian Peninsula, you've got Saudi Arabia, then you've got Yemen on the right-hand bottom side. Next to them is Oman. Well, Badr al-Busaidi, he is the Sultan of Oman. He's apparently jumped into the fray now to help with the ceasefire and all the rest of it. The point is, the entire region is destabilised and it affects trade, shipping, oil. It affects the globe, but especially that region, and everybody wants it to stop. And so we'll see what happens, you know.
Okay, let's get the focus back to Israel and Gaza for a few moments, because there's an Israeli proposal for resuming aid distribution in Gaza. What's the latest
I mentioned this to Robbo last week. Basically, this new proposal is this, that the IDF will oversee the distribution of the aid, but they're not going to be handling it themselves. The distribution is going to be handled by US contractors and other aid groups. The Gazans have to register to ensure that they're not part of Hamas, because Israel's not going to feed Hamas. And then the aid is to be given individually so that Hamas can't steal it. Now, various aid groups are saying, no, we don't want you to do that because, quote unquote, they don't want to replace the existing humanitarian system in Gaza. Now, please explain that to me, because the existing system meant that Hamas just stole it all. It makes you think that they're okay if Hamas steals all the aid. This doesn't make sense. And listen, Hamas simply refuses to negotiate. And they have said it's pointless to engage in talks because of this hunger war. Listen, before Israel closed the borders because they kept breaking the ceasefire, there was no hunger in Gaza. They still wouldn't negotiate. Israel closes the border, they still won't negotiate. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are, Hamas refuses to negotiate. So Israel's got to do what it's got to do.
Okay, looking a little further to the northeast, where Syria, that's the proximity to Israel, and of course they've got their new sort of regime in power there now, and Israel has been protecting Syrian Druze community.
Yes.
And they're being condemned for it. What's happening here?
This is horrifying, Neil. What's going on in Syria? It happened in Lebanon, but it's been happening in Syria. It is horrific. The new Syrian regime, which the whole world is pandering to, they're a terrorist group. And they have literally been butchering and slaughtering Druze, Christian and Alawite communities. Now, the Druze community in Syria are their families connected to the Druze community in Israel. And these rebels, these terrorist groups, the fighters of this new regime, they are literally butchering the Druze. So the Druze community in Israel have been begging Israel to help them save the Druze community. But here's the thing. Israel is fighting Hezbollah in Lebanon, the new Turkish-backed regime in Syria, the Iranian-backed Iraqis. Directly they're fighting with Iran. There's independent fighters that have attacked from Jordan. They're fighting with Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, as well as terror groups in Judea, Samaria and other parts of Israel. And now they're having to go into Syria and fight to protect the Druze because the savagery has been horrendous. So what happened is that Israel actually did respond to that, and she struck several places. They struck a military site in the Damascus suburb of Harasta, some unknown targets in the Daraa province in southern Syria, the Hama province in northwestern Syria, and Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Defense Minister Katz said that the Israeli military carried out, quote, a warning operation and struck the extremist group. This is a clear message to the Syrian regime. We will not allow the deployment of forces south of Damascus or any threat to the Druze community. Now, Israel's the only nation who's protecting these people in Syria. And then they're also helping to protect the Christian community as well. And this actually did bring a pause to the slaughter with the Syrian forces withdrawing. Now, to help the Druze community in Syria, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews have been delivering via the IDF about 1,500 packages of food for the Druze and Christians, Syrians in villages near the Israeli border. They're going to be providing medical aid soon. But what's shocking about this, a UN Special Envoy, Geir Peterson, condemned Israel for these actions. And he said, quote, I strongly condemn Israel's continued escalating violations of Syria's sovereignty, and I call for these attacks to cease at once and for Israel to stop endangering Syrian civilians. Excuse me, they're actually saving Syrian civilians from being slaughtered by the Syrian regime while the UN has been sitting on its hands doing nothing and been silent on the slaughters right in front of them.
These are challenging times, and propaganda machines work overtime, and it might be on both sides. Everything that you're hearing is a propaganda foundation, but when you are a Christian believer and you're called to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, which doesn't mean that everything that Israel does is perfectly right and always honourable, but there is a certain sentiment and a principle in the Christian heart, Mandy, praying for the peace of Jerusalem. That's something we can all do right where we are. We might not be involved in the conflict directly, but there is a spiritual battle going on, and God has his people, and the way we are called to pray is for peace in Jerusalem. Mandy, always appreciate your great insights around what's going on, and thanks so much for monitoring so closely all these developments around Israel and more broadly across the Middle East.
My pleasure.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.